Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and you're listening to The Business of Content, a podcast about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. In this week's episode, I take you inside the LinkedIn newsroom and explain why the social network hired some of the world's top business journalists. Back in 2011, LinkedIn announced that it was hiring Dan Roth, who was then the editor of Fortune.com, to serve as its editor-in-chief. Given LinkedIn's then role as mostly a repository for online resumes, the move had many scratching their heads. Over the next few years, though, Roth's team would roll out a number of editorial products. It started by curating outside news sources, sending LinkedIn users to articles published by business publications like the Wall Street Journal and Business Insider. Then it rolled out a blogging platform that was only available to influential users like Richard Branson and Bill Gates. Eventually, it then opened up its blogging platform to all users. During all this time, LinkedIn was steadily hiring journalists from some of the world's top business publications, including the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and Fortune. Today, it has an editorial staff of 60, and these editors are responsible for everything from curating user content to producing their own original reporting. I recently sat down with LinkedIn Senior Editor-at-Large, Isabel Regal. I asked her about how LinkedIn editors go about curating content, how they distribute the content on LinkedIn, and how they approach original reporting projects. Let's jump right into it. Hey, Isabel, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Simon. Thanks for having me.
So you're the senior editor at large, I believe that's your title at LinkedIn. What does that job entail on kind of a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So it's the role of the editorial team at LinkedIn is to provide members with the news and views they need to talk about things that matter today. So really our job is to engage the LinkedIn membership with content that is going to spark or cultivate smart professional conversations on the platform every day. And we do that in 9 countries and 7 languages, I believe, by now. My role, so I spent a few years actually building up our coverage outside the US. So I was working on developing our editorial team in Europe, in Asia, in Latin America. And for the past 6 months, I've been a senior editor at large, which is a fancy role for really being a senior editor on the team, writing and creating content every day, as well as kind of leading some transversal projects with other teams and providing some mentorship to editors on the team. So it's a pretty broad role, which is quite fun because I get to work on the things that I feel are important.
So are you doing a lot of management of other journalists and strategy, or are you still doing a lot of the kind of day-to-day editorial work yourself?
So not anymore. I was a manager for years, and I actually gave that up about 6 months ago to get back to my creative roots for a little bit. I think when you're working as a journalist, it's you kind of have to work on both sides and both skill sets, right? So now I'm more in a sort of day-to-day creating role, as well as some strategy, but not management.
What were you doing in the lead up to prior to taking the job at LinkedIn, and what made you make the jump?
Sure. So I am trained as a journalist, went to University of Missouri journalism school, and then I was a reporter and an editor in newspapers. Was a reporter at the Cambodia Daily, sadly now defunct newspaper in Phnom Penh. And I was an editor at Le Figaro in France. So I'm a French native. So I was on a foreign desk there up until 2011, late 2011, early 2012. I actually then left a newspaper, laid off, like many journalists, a familiar story, and was kind of freelancing and exploring what was out there back in 2012 when I came across this job ad on LinkedIn, actually. So it's a LinkedIn success story about being an editor at LinkedIn, and that's when I joined the team in 2012.
So you're not the only person who has a strong journalism background who was hired for LinkedIn. Several years ago, LinkedIn started making headlines because it was poaching business journalists from top publications like the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Fortune magazine. What was kind of the original thinking behind this move? So the person who was running this entire operation, I believe, was Dan Roth. What was kind of the initial thinking of? And what was the initial thinking behind hiring these professional journalists?
Sure. So Dan was hired in 2011. Dan Roth, he was at Fortune at the time. He is still our editor in chief, and he would tell the story better. But the thinking at the time was when Jeff Weiner, as CEO, hired him, was because Jeff sensed that LinkedIn was going to become more and more of a content platform. That it was really the direction that things were taking, and that it was important to have journalists kind of giving it direction so that you would have a quality platform and conversations. We always believe in the balance of machines and human algorithms and editors together to create a really positive and quality content environment on LinkedIn, and that's what we've done since 2011. So the editors focus on what we call the 3 C's. We like our acronyms. So it's create, curate, and cultivate. So we're creating our own original content. We're curating, and that's actually a really large part of it because, as you know, most of the content on LinkedIn is user generated. So we're sort of trying to surface the best conversations that are happening in the professional community on LinkedIn, and cultivating, which is really encouraging people to use the platform to have smart conversations and to share with their community on LinkedIn.
So when Dan Roth first started, though, it was almost entirely curation that he was focused on. I remember at the time that some business publications, like for instance Business Insider, started reporting that they were getting massive referral traffic from LinkedIn, and because it basically was launching these products that kind of curated that day's business news depending on what industry you worked in, and started linking to outside sources. And then the idea then was, though, to start generating content, native content to LinkedIn, first through the LinkedIn influencer program, but then you rolled out basic blogging capabilities to the rest of the LinkedIn users, at least the English language. I'm sure you've expanded since then. So can you talk a little bit about the curational aspect of the LinkedIn editorial team now? Like what role do editors play in finding content on LinkedIn and elevating it to a larger audience?
So yeah, the product has gone through so many phases, and you're just reminding me of all the 7 years I've spent here. It feels like a million years ago, when we had just external content. Today, the editors are a big part of our content offering is what we call top stories, which would be showing up on a search environment on mobile in the top right corner of your desktop experience, and it's really a curation of the top news that are vital to your professional world today, and the conversations that are happening on the platform around this news in the professional environment. So the editors are going to be sort of surfacing best, most interesting conversations from a variety of points of views that are happening on LinkedIn, so that you can sort of see a broad scope of the professional conversation, and you're going to be able to see things that are happening far beyond your network. So you in the feed, you'll see the people you know, but you'll see also a lot more. So if I'm looking at it right now in the UK, we have stories about banking fraud. We have stories about British Steel, or the railway system, which is always gets British people really talking and riled up, or AI or Brexit. So it's really just a broad scope of what's going on, and we see LinkedIn members talking about this and sharing really important insights, because it's the industry that they're working on, or because it's impacting their daily work. And so we're trying to surface this as much as possible.
So the top right hand corner, that little widget's today's news and views. Is that what you're
Mhm.
talking about? So that seems to be like very, very general new, like business news. I know at some point, I don't know if this is still the case, you had these individual channels where if I worked in, say, the agriculture industry, I was automatically subscribed to a channel, and then editors, if they found good agriculture content, they would plug it into that, distribute on that channel, and it would show up kind of in my main feed. How much are you personalizing this this content for users based on the industry they work in, and how are you surfacing content that's industry specific?
So everyone's LinkedIn experience is going to be different. It is personalized because it is based on your network, on your industry, on where you're working. So you are going to see things that are more specifically relevant to your industry, to your company, to your colleagues as well. And that's where really the mix of algorithms and editors is really important. So you're going to have that level of personalization and relevance that's coming from algorithms. But we also see value in bursting that filter bubble a little bit, giving you things that you don't yet know that you care about, but are actually going to be very impactful trends to the future of work, to your industry, to your professional lives. And things are just big and important to society as a whole, and to your working lives. So we have editors who are focused on specific industries like healthcare, finance, or engineering, software engineering. But we also have some more broadly relevant news to the professional world. And I think the mix of the two is really important.
But where am I discovering a lot of that news? Like, is it mostly in that widget in the top right hand corner, or are you distributing it through the feed, the main, feed where I consume all my other content? How is that discovery happening?
It's going to be in both. It's going to be in the feed. It's going to be through notifications, through the feed, through the widget. So that the widget, that's the desktop experience actually. It's mostly a mobile experience now that's going to show up on the search tab in your mobile app. So it's kind of baked into all of the experience.
What motivates a user to write and upload an article to LinkedIn?
So it's not just articles. I should just say it's also, posts and videos that are actually
Yeah.
having massive growth. Really, it's about a couple things. It's about establishing your professional reputation, right? I like to say that sort of content is the new resume, right? It's not enough to just have that list of the accomplishments. It's also, are you staying in the know about your industry? Are you sharing your expertise with others? Are you being generous with your community, sharing what you know, engaging in conversation, being on top of what's going on? And so that's a big factor. It's also just people wanting to start a conversation and get informed and learn from others. One thing that I love in my experience of LinkedIn is being able to, start a conversation, post something that I'm thinking about, and then in the comments, like learning way, way more about the topic from people in my network who have that expertise or experience. So those are, I think, the two big reasons.
Would you advise like someone who, where the standard for looking for a job used to be that you kept your resume updated, obviously kept it updated on LinkedIn, but then you were also, surfing jobs boards and applying for jobs. Like, would you like advise someone to be also then regularly blogging on LinkedIn? So obviously that's a lot where a lot of recruiters and other industry folks are hanging out, to where you can increase discovery and kind of establish yourself a little bit more as a thought leader to increase your chances of being noticed by a potential employer or client?
I think that definitely helps. You want to be out there, be a fixture in your industry, someone that people know they can come to for expertise and for help, and who is just being social with people in their industry. And I know it can sound a bit daunting, and I really don't want it to be. You don't have to be a professional writer. There's a lot of different formats that you can use. Video is can be less intimidating to people who don't really want to write, or you can just write shorter shares and share articles. It's just really about being social, about staying in touch with your network and not just going to them when you need help, but also giving help. We talk a lot about giving help and getting help, and I think as we all know, networks are so important in getting you to your next play in your career, getting you opportunities. So I really think about content as a way to continue growing those connections with your network.
Do you see a lot of users that are essentially publishing articles as a form of like content marketing to drive business connections and leads for their businesses?
Yeah, it's definitely, part of the toolbox, I would say. One thing that I always caution people against though is being too overtly salesy. You really want to be useful to your audience and be authentic in the things that you're sharing. And people, can smell a fraud from a mile away. I think the audience is extremely sophisticated now. Like, there's been 10 plus years of this kind of content sharing online. So I think being genuine and being helpful is very important, and not just being promotional.
Can you talk about the role that LinkedIn plays in driving traffic now to and readers to publishers that aren't on LinkedIn? Obviously, that was kind of the initial goal when Dan Roth's first started. How much of that is happening now?
So it is happening. We're hearing anecdotally from publishers. Our focus is really on building community and conversations. We're seeing publishers be really successful with when they're kind of growing a community around their content on LinkedIn. The BBC News, The Economist, like those are really active and interesting pages. And then also seeing journalists really take the tool in their own hands, and publishers encouraging their journalists to do that and sharing their stories, and encouraging conversations around their stories, often getting the next story idea from the comment thread, and other sources, and just giving professionals on LinkedIn kind of a different point of view and kind of the behind the curtains look at their work as journalists, and that has been really successful.
And what about like newsrooms themselves? I feel like LinkedIn is still like I subscribe to a bunch of business public or kind of publications within my industry on LinkedIn, but I don't know that they're publishing a ton to LinkedIn or like promoting their content as much as they are on like some other platforms. Like do you feel like there's still a learning curve, or that publishers are still kind of slow to really adopt LinkedIn in their distribution strategy?
I think we're seeing adoptions. It depends on the publishers, obviously, because we have a professional context on LinkedIn. It's working really more for business publishers, especially, and stories around the professional world, or the economy, and trade publications. We're here to really like work with publishers. We're not trying to replace them. We're not trying to compete in that way. We're really just about building a helpful professional community.
So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I have a lot of followers there, and I really strive to be like a really
Mhm.
good curational source for kind of news within my space,
I know.
with
I
publishing
follow
and
you.
tech. But I've noticed over the last year or so, like any LinkedIn post where I link to an outside source, like I link to like DigiDig, TechCrunch, Bloomberg a lot. It's shown to a very tiny percentage of my followers now. Whereas like a year or so ago, it was shown to a much larger percentage of my followers. Whereas if sometimes if I post something that doesn't contain a link, so I'll write like a little kind of mini observation that I have or industry analysis, it's shown to a much wider audience. And also if I upload like an image, this looks like it was a very deliberate change in the algorithm. Is LinkedIn making a concerted effort to keep users on LinkedIn? Because that's what's always my thought is when a platform does something like that, where it seems to devalue links and favor native content.
No, we if you look at our editorial products, like the top news that we were talking about earlier, it's linking out to all of the newsrooms that are doing this extremely precious original reporting. So definitely not. I think feeds change constantly, algorithms change constantly, the ecosystem is constantly evolving, and what people respond to is constantly evolving. As we talked about earlier, and I've been around for 7 years. I'm a content creator myself on LinkedIn, and I've seen kind of the formats that work better really like vary and change over time, and that's just a factor of of so many different things, including just how the internet is evolving and what people are responding to. So I always encourage people to just keep experimenting and to just really be focused on creating conversations and engaging with their followers and their community and finding out where they're getting value. Personally, I find a lot more value in a couple really high quality comments than any other metric. So yeah, I think it's just a constantly changing and evolving ecosystem.
How does the editorial team efficiently sift through so much content? Like, are there quality signals that they use? Like, if I have an article that's distributed by the editorial team, is the next article I publish somehow flagged for them to review earlier because I'm known for producing higher quality content? Like, how does stuff surface so that they are able to come across it more quickly and distribute it to a wider audience?
So we have search, so we're looking for, we know what's in the news today, and we're looking at, who is talking about this and posting about this. So the major advice for content creators is to always be sort of on the pulse of where the conversation is and what's going on in the news agenda, what people are talking about. We do, we have, as any editor would, we know, who are some good contributors that we're keeping an eye on because we're used to and we've seen their work by now. And we actually try though to not rely on that too much because we want to have a broad view and give room for every voice and a diversity of voices, including people who are just speaking up for the first time on LinkedIn and we may not have seen before. Um, and you have again that algorithm and editor mix that's going to surface things, and we're going to start seeing things in our own feed, or like, oh, this is picking up steam. What is this about?
So if like Donald Trump announces new tariffs on China, your editors are then primed to start using the search function to see who's writing about that, and if there's anybody who understands trade really well who's writing an article or a blog up or just a status update or something,
Hmm.
then you're more likely to surface that.
Exactly. Yeah.
I've noticed that a lot of articles published to LinkedIn, they feature, especially the ones that come across my feed, feature a lot of more general career advice. Is that a lot more common, like versus more specific industry analysis? Like I keep on seeing articles about, the first time, like how to hire people or, what I learned as a manager, that type of stuff, and less stuff that's like a little bit more kind of industry insight specific type stuff.
We're seeing both. We're seeing both. I think members are really hungry for guidance. It's a very quickly evolving world of work, and we all have to adapt. And so people are hungry for guidance, for hearing from other people's experiences to help them navigate this. As jobs are changing quickly, and so there's both, right? There's being on top of your industry, and there's getting that career advice, whether you're a new starter or coming out of parental leave, or in a later on in your career trying to do a transition. So we're seeing sort of all of it. The editorial team will really focus on helping people navigate this professional world. So we have kind of different buckets that we're thinking about. How do you build a future-proof career? And that's both industry expertise, and just adapting to all these changes. How do you navigate this fast changing world? And the way that it's changing. It's everything from from Brexit to AI disruption, and how do you embrace this changing workforce? There are, I was just reading now, like 5 generations working together in the same companies. Now you have the most diverse workforce that we've ever seen. You have more and more women, and we're talking about maybe more the U.S. I think you're American, but this is actually really applying around the world, and we're present in so many countries that we're able to see kind of these trends all over the place. So that's really our focus, and then members are themselves are sharing the content that speaks to them. But if you're seeing something in your feed that doesn't work for you, you do have the possibility of curating that and sending us signals about what you want to see more or less of as well.
Can you talk about the original content that's being produced by the editorial team? Like, what's the strategy there? Are you trying to emulate like a business publication, like a Forbes or a Bloomberg, or is there something like what's kind of when you're thinking about where do we you have from what I've read, you only have like 50 journalists total, which is obviously much smaller than like a New York Times or a Wall Street Journal or something like that. How do you? What's kind of the strategy and how you deploy those resources in terms of creating original content?
I think we're at about 60 plus now, and we're hiring in a few more countries at the moment, actually. But we're not here to replace or emulate really any newsrooms out there. And that original reporting work that these newsrooms do, that those journalists do, is so precious and so important to all of us and to our futures as liberal democracies. Couldn't say that enough. So what we're trying to do, what we're focused on, is really conversations and professional conversations. So when we create content, we're thinking about what do our members need to know to be more equipped to handle the future of work, and what is it that we at LinkedIn can uniquely do that you will not see in all these other incredible newsrooms. So we're doing a few things. One is we like to start conversations with some of the leaders of the business world. So we have this podcast called Hello Monday. We have that's hosted by my colleague Jesse Hempel in New York, and we just have these fascinating people with really interesting careers and really interesting perspectives on the world of work, coming to speak about the issues that are on their mind. Or our interview series conversation with our editor in chief, where you're again bringing top CEOs, top movers and shakers in the world of work, to just kind of get their perspectives. And then we're doing some sort of beat specific reporting. We have a couple awesome healthcare reporters who are writing and again also curating and cultivating around the changes in the healthcare industry. I love the story that we had recently on nurses' extreme commutes, where you might have someone living in Pennsylvania and commuting to Florida to work, and sort of the forces at work within the healthcare industry and within nursing that are pushing these men and women to make these like pretty extreme life decisions around where they work and where they live. And for stories like that, what we can do uniquely is bring LinkedIn data to bear on those stories to understand, for instance, in the case of the nursing story, where are there shortages of nurses in the United States? What is the situation in those cities? What are the skills gaps that we're seeing, for instance? So I love doing that kind of storytelling around data, but because it's something that is really unique to LinkedIn.
How like scalable is that leveraging of data? Like, do you have to pull aside an engineer every single time to get them to pull it, or do you guys have tools at your disposal to where you're able to say, okay, I'm reporting on this industry, I need to get some original LinkedIn data, and I can just pull all this stuff?
A bit of both. So we have incredible data scientists working with us who are able to, get those insights and make sure the science is sound and all of this. And that we work with a lot of research that is done just across the organization that we're able to leverage, as well as tools. Our economic graph team launched a dashboard with the World Bank recently, and that's actually public. So anyone can use it for their own reporting, and we're able to use it as well. And we're just constantly innovating on new tools as well.
Is most of the consumption on LinkedIn content driven within LinkedIn? Like, how much traffic do articles receive from outside sources? I know if I publish an article, it gives me the option of tweeting it out or sharing it. And obviously, there's probably some search traffic and stuff. Like, what's kind of, when you're looking at the analytics dashboard for content, is most of the content driven within LinkedIn internally?
I honestly would not be able to answer that question right now. I think the conversations, like where we're really looking, is the vibrancy of the conversations that are happening on LinkedIn. Are people finding value and returning on a daily basis. That's really what we're looking at.
Well, for a long time, LinkedIn was known as this place you only went to update your resume. And I read that the editorial efforts had a lot to do with getting more users engaged with the platform on a more daily basis. In your time at LinkedIn, you started, I think, in 2011. Have you seen any kind of internal metrics, analytics showing that the editorial efforts are leading to more kind of prolonged engagement in LinkedIn where people are coming more often because of it?
So I started in 2012, and I think, yeah, I'd love to, I'd love to take that credit. I think it's part of a company-wide effort. I don't think that you can necessarily, isolate one person and one team, because the work that we do is incredibly embedded, within the product. We're part of the product team. We're working with software engineers and data scientists every day. So it's just a company-wide, really, effort. I think having an editorial team is a really powerful differentiator. I hope. I like that we're able to kind of set the tone for content on LinkedIn. We're able to have, kind of one-on-one conversations with members, and relationships with members to help us really understand the community, and get the pulse of the community. It's definitely, the platform has changed tremendously in the 7 years that I've been on. I look at old screenshots, the Wayback Machine. I can hardly recognize it. And the products that we've been working on have evolved so much. It's great to see, tens of millions of members, receiving our daily rundown every day, which is our business news digest, in 12 different editions around the world, in 8 languages or 7 languages. That is definitely a massive difference compared to where it was when I started in 2012, and there were like 3 of us editors at the time, 3 or 4.
So LinkedIn has seemed to place a higher emphasis on native video recently. How has that impacted your job? Like, is the editorial team hiring more kind of video people with video expertise? Like, what are you guys doing to encourage the native video?
Yeah, we have, video has been incredibly popular, and we're seeing video as a format being very, very engaging, and people are really responding to it really well. So on the editorial side, we've had a video sort of side to the team for, I want to say, 3 years now, or 3, 4 years, who are producing incredible things. So we have a gorgeous video studio in New York. We also have a video studio in our Bangalore office, where our India editorial team works. We are producing hundreds of videos every year, from daily news videos to major interviews with major guests. And every editor is also empowered to create their own videos. Like, I have a quick video series every week, and we've launched live recently, and editors have kind of seized that tool. My colleague Caroline Fairchild is excellent at that, and doing live video as well, which is a great way to be just directly on the pulse of what members are responding to.
Well, I know outlets like Business Insider and Cheddar are uploading kind of more professional video, but it seems like individual users, when they are uploading video, it's more kind of vlog style, just turning on their phones and just
Mhm.
speaking into their phones. Is that what you're seeing mainly from a user generated content perspective?
We're seeing both, but yes, there's a lot of that, very immediate, it's the magic of live video, right? There's rarely a lot of production on live video for obvious technical reasons. But also, it's the beauty of a social platform. Your video doesn't have to look like what it looks like on TV, right? It's very immediate. It's very raw and just personal, and within a professional context, but it's just real, and genuine. And I think that's what works best. And the video series that I do every week is just me and my cell phone, really. And pretty we've interviewed government ministers with just a cell phone. and it works just fine. So I love that there's a much lower barrier to entry for everyone.
Okay, Isabel. Well, those were all the questions I had. Where can people find you online?
On LinkedIn, obviously. Isabel Hogod, which I know no one can pronounce, let alone spell. It's lnkd.in/Isa. That works as well. And yeah, connect, follow, reach out. I always love to hear from members. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Okay, that's all we have for you today. Be sure to subscribe to the Business of Content on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. See you next week.